overcast and somewhat chilly Thursday in Brisbane. I'm Chris Irons, former Commissioner, Body Corporate and Community Management Advisor, Strata Advisor with Hines Legal. With me, as always, Frank Higginson, partner, Hines Legal. Frank, welcome.
Hello, everyone, again.
Thanks as always for tuning in. Don't forget to like and share and register for these events. Not only do you find out what topic and when, but also some content afterwards, which is pretty important. If you're watching this live or even afterwards, chuck us a question or a comment via the YouTube comment facility. We're here and we're unafraid, I think is the point to make, to respond and answer. Today, Frank, relationship rescue, but relationship rescue with your body corporate manager. Fair to say, one of the most important relationships in the body corporate.
Absolutely. I mean, it's as much as they're not compulsory. I think you've got rocks in your head if you don't have one managing your building, particularly if it's a bigger building, because it is really, really complicated. But I think probably, I mean, as we sort of spoke about this one beforehand, I think for me, probably one of the biggest issues for strata managers is they get blamed for a whole lot of things that aren't necessarily their fault. And as a result, they become a target. You know what I mean? It's quite often they might fire the bullets, but they're not actually loading them.
That's right.
And I think a lot of people don't get that.
That's right. So we're going to try and break that down a little bit today. And then we have a bunch of tips to give you at the back end of today about what to do to actually improve the relationship. Make sure you tune in for the duration. It's fair to say that all professional relationships go through ups and downs at times, except us. We're perfect, Frank, but all other professional relationships go through them. You look at business generally, and the titans of business rarely go through any kind of period of time without having some kind of falling out with their associates or business partners or whatever. Same applies here, I think. It would be unrealistic, I think you'd agree, Frank, for body corporate manager and a committee owner contractor to have a 100% blissful relationship through all eternity.
Agree. I mean, you're not going to, you know, it's that trying to please all of the people all of the time. You can do it sometimes, but never all the time. You know what I mean? So, and, you know, in Strata, there's a bunch of different opinions that people can have about certain things and certain projects and certain decisions. And that's going to happen. I suppose the nature of the democracy that we have in bodies corporate.
It sure is. And I think when it comes to body corporate managers, they have a unique role. They have a position of trust, a position of influence. And I think it's fair to say a position of power as well in some instances. That's despite the fact that theirs is an unregulated industry in Queensland. So you've got this weird kind of tension, if you like, in some respects. I don't really want to use the word tension, but I guess that kind of explains it. Frank and I deal with body corporate managers day in, day out, and I think we've met pretty much every body corporate manager in the state. Sometimes over and over, and some of them, I dare say, are very heartily sick of the sight of the two of us. But look, I suppose the point we're trying to make there, Frank, is that having met pretty much everybody corporate manager in the state, the vast majority are professional, thorough, committed, aren't they?
Yeah. So there's one or two we know that are what you'd call bad eggs, but I could say the same thing about lawyers. Probably can't say the same thing about former commissioners because there's not as many of you as there are the rest of us. But yeah, no one's going through usually with a view to trying to dud people or do the wrong thing. That's the reality of it, because your real life's too short for that sort of stuff.
Yep. And when a relationship breaks down, it has impacts on both sides of the equation in this case. So for the owner, the committee, contractors, if the relationship breaks down, we know that there's a lot of stress and a lot of grievance. It's also the same thing for a body corporate manager too. There's been some research commissioned by the peak body, the SCA, disclosure, I'm a board member of that organisation, about the impacts of difficult and challenging situations on body corporate managers as well. I think the first point that we want to make, Frank, I suppose it's a little bit of context setting. It's about body corporate managers, just the volume and breadth of responsibilities they have.
Absolutely. You know, and it's one of those things, I think probably like from a legal perspective, our engagement's normally as good as the next phone call. If a client's not happy, Frank, I don't want to do act from anymore. Send my file here. We're done. With body corporate managers, it's not necessarily that. You're in a contract. You're in a contract for a period of somewhere usually between 1 and 3 years. That's fixed unless there's some substantial breaches. So you're really locked in that relationship. So understanding, I suppose, where everyone's coming from is a really important thing. And so when you look at the typical body corporate manager, and I suppose this varies organisation to organisation. It'll vary by the size of the buildings, the number of the buildings, the number of committees, all that sort of lot. You might, I'd say there's probably not a strata manager out there that doesn't have somewhere between probably 30 and 50 buildings that they've got that they're managing. So that means they've got 30 to 50 AGMs every year, and potentially adjourned AGMs, which hold over then for another week. So you might, 70 or 80 AGMs, meetings to go to. On top of that, you've got, I don't know, if everybody corporate's different, might be monthly committee meetings for some buildings, quarterly for others, once every 6 months for others. But again, you've got 40 buildings, so on average, I don't know, 320 odd committee meetings a year. And then you go and look at the number of owners in that building and individual committee members, and you've got hundreds of people that are relying on you to provide a particular service. And so I think what, from our perspective, making body corporate managers' lives easier is a good way to be. From an owner's perspective or a committee member's perspective, one of the things to start with is to understand is that, yes, that building and that issue might be the most important thing for you at the time, but the person you're chasing for a response or pursuing for an answer or needing help from might have 40 other people needing the same style of service from you at that point in time. And that gets really hard for body corporate managers to manage.
So there's a bit of reality checking that needs to go on in that situation as a start point. Look, where else does the relationship go wrong? Well, we think the primary driver for it is a misunderstanding, and we touched upon this in the intro of the body corporate manager's role. Body corporate manager is not there to interpret legislation for you and tell you what section blah blah of the Act does. That's the job of my former office to do that for you. The body corporate manager is there to act on instruction, aren't they, Frank?
Yeah, they're creatures of contract, and the same as we do. We don't go off half-cocked making decisions off our own bat. If we're going to do something for a body corporate, we'll do it on instructions. Here's the draft letter. Do you want us to send this? Out it goes. Here's the choices you can make. Which one do you want to do? Then we'll execute on that one. And body corporate managers are the same. They're not independent decision makers in their own right about any body corporate issue, really, and they all should take instructions from their bodies corporates about what they're being asked to do.
And kind of ties in with a point or something that we hear from committees from time to time. Frank, you must have seen this before. What should we do? Type thing.
Yeah. And I think that's, I don't want to get too territorial here with legal advice and all that sort of thing. But as much as sometimes I can be a bit disparaging of the legal profession, one of the things that you do learn is the need to be detailed, the need to understand that every single bit of advice you give isn't necessarily the same as the next one. There's facts and circumstances that change. So what we see, and this comes, I think, from a body corporate manager's perspective with being busy. When you're getting bombarded with 40 million emails, phone calls, and whatever it might be, it's what do we do here? What should we do here? What about this? It gets really easy to pluck almost advice that you've seen off another body corporate client you're acting for with something similar circumstances. Take a pet approval or a pet refusal. Well, you can't say no. Well, and I think that's not the answer. The answer is you might be able to say no, but there's a whole bunch of moving parts that go into it. And as much as it's unlikely that you'll be able to do it, there might be the opportunity to do it. And I suppose for anyone who's interested in pets, you can go back and look through the previous webinars. But that whole desire to help sometimes creates more harm, in my mind, because it's almost you don't train people. And this is one of the pains of this whole market, I suppose, in a sense, is the you buy a unit, you get on the committee, or you're a lot owner, and you ask questions. If the questions get answered where you're firing them as opposed to redirected where they should be, it starts to create an expectation.
And that ties in very nicely with the next point that we were going to make about expectations. This is why relationships don't go according to plan. Body corporate managers are appointed by the body corporate. not by individual owners, and they don't have a relationship necessarily with individual owners. That's a relationship managed by the committee. And look, that of course doesn't mean the body corporate manager shouldn't talk to an individual owner or shouldn't talk to a tenant for that reason. That's not what we're saying. What it means is that the body corporate manager does not have the power and is not entitled to act unilaterally based upon something you ask them to do or something you instruct them to do. There's a process through which they go for that. It's not an individual thing as much as perhaps an owner might prefer it to be that way. And I guess the third point, unsurprisingly, is communication, isn't it, Frank? And we've touched upon that already, haven't we? And in particular, it's about expectations and tone and what we're doing in our communications, isn't it? So if you are an owner or a committee member or a caretaker or a tenant and you send an email to a body corporate manager and it's aggressive in tone, demanding, looking for a response in a nanosecond, well, unlikely you're going to get any of that. And also, Frank, it's likely, isn't it, that you might get that back in return.
It is, and that's human nature. That's the thing. It's like we can legislate all we like about nuisance and behaviour and all the other bits and pieces that people want covered. But the reality is most of the issues we deal with in Strata are human behaviour, human relationships. So if someone comes and punches you in the nose, you're going to want to punch them back. And in that sense, you know, the angry email into the Strata manager demanding response, imposing timeframes and all that sort of stuff, the easiest thing for them to do is to put it to the bottom of the list.
Yep.
And that's what a lot of them will do. And the other thing I think that from a Strata manager's perspective, so we are, I suppose, in a sense, defending Strata managers here, and I suppose we should be, because it can be a very thankless task. You know, there's days I wouldn't do it for all the tea in China, you know, it's just no. But there's that Groundhog Day element of it too, you know. So, you know, you've got a committee, you've got a pet approval, you've got the committee saying, no, we're not going to accept pets. You know, it's just like, here we go again. And everyone's getting all hot under the collar and communicating. And you've still got 40 other buildings that need your services that day. And that's where toning things down and getting a little bit sort of calmer about how you approach those things will usually get a better outcome from an owner's perspective to a busy Strata manager. You certainly, and even I know from my perspective, it's the same thing. I get busy, you send me an aggressive email looking for something, particularly when you're a lawyer on the other side, you go right to the bottom of the list. I almost don't care. Unless it impacts the client's interest at that point in time, it can wait 2 days. And it will. If you're going to be snarky, that's what I'll do.
Yep. I think that, no, I mean, that's right. Body corporate managers aren't robots. And I just want to pick up on the comment, Julia. I know you're a regular, Julia. Thanks for tuning in. Talking about body corporate managers taking on too much. Surely it's not an excuse not to do the job they're paid for. No, it's not, Julia, and wasn't pointing it out that way. What we were saying is that it's important to have a sense of reality about where things sit. You are one of a portfolio of buildings and a portfolio-wide group of owners, committees who all need something at any one time. There's a difference between that and not doing a contracted set of responsibilities. Frank touched upon this point just a moment ago. It's not one-sided, of course. There are areas in which a body corporate manager goes wrong and they contribute to the relationship breaking down, and some of those things, radio silence is a guaranteed way to cause issues, isn't it? Just not keeping people informed about progress on something. That's almost guaranteed, isn't it?
It is. And I mean, all of the issues we see, there's an element, not all of them, a lot of them we see, there's an element of that. It's that communication piece in terms of, you know what, you've made a request, the committee's considering it, the next meeting is whatever date it is, they'll be back to you after that, rather than nothing, which people, if they're asking for something, are instantaneously, unfortunately, going to go to the glass half empty thing, which means they're telling me no.
Absolutely. Not doing what the contract says. We've already touched upon that in our discussion so far. Acting in a way that's not consistent with legislation. Probably one of the big ones, though, is taking sides, isn't it, Frank?
Yeah. I think, you know, really, most Strata managers are pretty good at being Switzerland, and they've really got to be. You know, their continued engagement is contingent on probably a relationship with the community as a whole. So as a rule, most won't really tick a side in a dispute. They try and they try to facilitate it, and one of the reasons Chris sort of joined us is to help mediate disputes, because what tends to happen is strata managers, when they get involved in trying to help solve things and mediate disputes, for a better phrase, inevitably, Chris, a mediation doesn't produce a win-win, a win-lose outcome. It produces a compromised outcome. So everyone's got a little bit of what they want, but not everything of what they want.
Nope.
And what can happen for strata managers is they get blamed by both people or both sides for not getting all of what they want.
That's right.
So it's a very fine line.
And it's particularly the case if you've got a scheme where there are factions opposing each other. It's very easy to want to take sides in that particular scenario. A couple of other things. I think not being transparent is a big one. That contributes to the relationship going poorly. Body corporate manager acting as though they're the committee. Sometimes they are the committee, but that's not
It's
common.
a separate engagement.
Yep. And then there are the things which happen only, in our experience, in a very, very, very small percentage of cases, and that are things which are outright wrong, such as illegal acts, fraud. But as I say, very, very rarely is that the case. How to improve it all? Well, you'll be pleased to know that Frank and I have come up with a 12-step plan. It's a bit like AA, isn't it, Frank? And we're going to go through those 12 steps in a moment. But just to pick up on a couple of comments, Chris, thanks for joining and tuning in. 2 days response, okay, but no response, not okay. I agree, not okay. However, Chris, important to know what the question was and what the initial communication was, because there are some things that a body corporate manager would receive that, frankly, don't warrant a response. And they don't need to respond, and they're not obliged to respond. So I would just add that as an observation. And a few comments from TCM. Hello, TCM.
Sunny North Queensland.
Sunny North Queensland. Who wouldn't want to be there right at the moment?
Yep.
And some really good observations there about people not understanding what the manager does, needing to raise awareness. Great point. Common misconception that we are engaged to act as maintenance agents or mediators, and I would absolutely 100% agree with that. I see that happen a lot in body corporate world. It's a difficult one. Shall we do the 12-point plan, Frank?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to kick it off. So your relationship with your body corporate manager isn't awesome. How do you improve? Step 1, as Aretha would say, respect. You've got to put yourself in their shoes. Treat them as you would wish to be treated. That's assuming that you aren't obsessed or somewhat psychotic. I'm a big believer that you always attract more flies with honey. So you do need to put yourself in the shoes of the other party and offer and approach things on a respectful basis. Frank, number 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And this really follows on with what we're sort of having from the crew at TCM in not so sunny Cairns right now. And it's really, this is more than anything else from an owner's perspective or a committee's perspective. And as much as this is difficult to a degree, because the sole qualification to get on a committee is still doing this, and there's no qualification to buy a piece of real estate other than having the money. It's trying to start to understand what the roles and responsibilities actually are. Because the body corporate manager absolutely can be the focal point for all of the communications from the body corporate. And there's the same with, we get this one pretty regularly. I know probably every strata manager in the state has had it, is what are you guys doing? I pay my levies, which pay your fees every quarter, thinking that all of that goes to the body corporate manager. So it is, I think for me, if you're sitting on the other side of the fence and you've got an issue with your strata manager from a lot owner perspective or otherwise, it's start to understand what it is they're required to do. And that is where Commissioner's Office can help. These things can help. Reading their agreement can help. Understanding even whether it's within their responsibility. So back to the maintenance contractor. If there's a leaking tap in your unit, that's the body corporate manager is not someone who comes on site and fixes that. If it's a body corporate responsibility, the committee may instruct them to engage a contractor to go and arrange for that to be fixed. But it's not ringing my body corporate manager, Chris, and say, mate, come fix my leaky tap, because that's not what his job is.
Because I pay your fees. Yeah. Good point, Frank.
Yeah.
Number 3, we've already touched upon this before. Set your expectations appropriately. And that's expectations about timeframes, expectations about responses, and expectations about what can be done. We come back to the leaking tap issue. If you email your body corporate manager and say, my tap's leaking, I demand you come out and fix it within the hour, well, let's just say that that's pretty unlikely to take place. But my tap's leaking, what can we arrange? You know, could you please bring this to the committee's attention? That's probably a far more amenable way of things getting done, I would have thought.
Yeah.
Frank, over to you. Number 4.
Utilise other resources. BCCM office. We would get, I don't know, 5 to 10 inquiries a day from people inquiring online from us about particular body corporate issues. Some of them are, you know, worth us quoting straight up because we know that these people have exhausted whatever it is, but we actually refer quite a few people to the Commissioner's office. So it sounds to me like you're looking for free advice, go talk here. Now, I recognise that's easier to do when people expect lawyers to charge, and there's the expectation then from a body corporate manager side of things, I'm paying you these fees. But by the same token, it's part of starting to manage expectations and educate people that this is where you go for this type of advice. This is not what we're here for. So ring them. It's public service. It's paid for by the state government. And to be honest, the people on the phones there are pretty bloody good at what they do.
They're outstanding, frankly. And look, the number of times I have seen an owner or committee member or contractor complain that the body corporate manager did not tell them section blah, blah of the Act applied or what that meant. That's because it's not their job to do that. My turn. Number 5, take a look at how you're communicating. Think about tone, words, volume, format, demands, how long. Think about the difference between a 1,000-word treatise about your issue as opposed to a couple of short, sharp sentences which get right to the nub of things. And like I said before, if you're going to start out a communication with aggro, you can expect that things will probably deteriorate from that point because that is just human nature. So think about the way you're communicating, think about the ability of that to trigger, and then you might want to temper your approach to suit. Frank, next.
And that follows with sort of that professional and non-emotive correspondence is the way to actually get things done. And I think probably a couple of things, I mean, what do you call them? Adjectives, descriptive words like corrupt, criminal, illegal, all those sort of things, never helpful in terms of getting a response from someone. Obviously, those are serious things to throw around. And I think probably a couple of things, very simple. Imagine whatever you're sending is put in front of an adjudicator in 6 months' time. How's that going to read? 24-hour rule. If you've got something that's not helpful, I'll kill my phone, sorry. Park it for 24 hours, think about it, and then respond to it. It's just that takes the heat out of things. But, you know, in terms of getting a reaction that's positive, calling someone corrupt is never going to be that.
And it's probably more than likely wrong anyway, what you're saying. My turn. Give yourself a strong reality check. Now, this one probably, let's be frank, won't go down well with many people, but give yourself a reality check. Are you the only person in your building with any issue with the body corporate manager? If the answer is yes, then that may be telling you something. Have a good think and try to be a bit self-reflective and a bit self-interrogative about it all. Is the problem with your body corporate manager, or does it actually lie elsewhere in this particular case?
And it's almost the principles of things where people, we didn't put that on the list, but that also probably counts. It's the principle of the matter. So I had a conversation with a fairly educated body corporate committee member, lot owner, quite upset with what came out from a body corporate manager in terms of AGM papers. Brought it into me, showed me the papers, he showed me the section of the Act. Absolutely, it did not comply, wasn't word perfect. But my question to him was, why does it matter? Because it didn't. People are going to vote on the motion. It will be what it will be. There's no consequence that comes from not having the thing word perfect. But he had a real bee in his bonnet about the process not being 100% right and why the paper's right and all sort of stuff when it didn't matter. And I mean, there's a district court decision that ages ago that we all quote every time, that where the district court judge says this legislation is almost incomprehensible. It's impossible to comply with every bit of it. So it's that point of principle. Do you want to be a warrior for everything to be squeaky clean and 100% right? This might not be the place to play, in a sense.
Yeah.
Because it's never going to be that way.
Absolutely. Where are we up to, Frank? I think we're up to number 8.
Realistic about outcomes. You know what I mean? It's sort of, and this comes up all the time too. Body corporate managers, contracts, management rights agreements are the same. Timing for resolution of disputes in the commissioner's office is you've got to be realistic about things. You know what I mean? If there's a contract in place, then unless there's something that goes horribly wrong, that contract's going to be binding on the body corporate until it expires.
Right.
That's all there is to it. So kicking and squealing and getting upset and wanting to upset and change the apple cart and terminate people and all that sort of stuff without cause is simply not going to lead to happy outcomes, and it'll be unhappy outcomes on your part. So just being realistic that that's what we've got. How do we make it work in the meantime, which is really part of what this is about.
I think so, yeah. My turn, number 9. If there is a problem with the body corporate manager, think about whether it's actually a problem at committee level and needs to be addressed at committee level, or there's a problem with the way the committee is communicating and making decisions. I would suggest that maybe focusing your energies there is perhaps the way you should be looking at the situation. And Frank, they might fire the bullets. This is the body corporate manager, but they don't load them.
Nope. Very rarely does that happen. And I suppose if you do have, concerns, as Chris has mentioned before, it's a 5-page diatribe is far less effective than also, this is what happened. This is what should have happened. This is what I would like done about it. You're incompetent, doesn't cut it. What do you mean? And just like people ignore that name calling stuff. It's like, guys, and from a committee perspective, it's almost like performance management inside an office environment with employees. This is what we'd like. This is what, the expectation is. Are we on the right page with that? And can we please make sure this doesn't happen again?
Yep.
Rather than demanding it is a much, much better way to get an outcome.
And that flows nicely into yours, number 10, Frank.
Be clear about what you actually want. That's it. You know what I mean? It's sort of not general whinges. It's what do I want? And so if you want the point scoring exercise, be clear that this isn't right for these reasons and this is what I'd like you to do. Recognize that might not happen. If there was an issue with an approval of something in a particular period of time and it shouldn't have happened the way it should have happened, then identifying that as well. It's just the sort of the general name calling. What do you actually want?
Yeah.
What do you want?
You'd be surprised how much that gives people a pause for thought. My turn. Give the body corporate manager a chance to respond. Ideally, that will happen through the committee. But look, if you've got a problem, you've got to give the body corporate manager a chance to respond and possibly a chance to do something about it. That's really important. And again, it sounds really simple, but it's something which gets overlooked a lot of the time. Think about it as due process. If you've got an issue with someone or you've got an allegation to make about someone, they need to be given the opportunity to respond to that. And if it's a large firm or a franchised firm, then there's the opportunity to escalate after that, but give the chance to respond in the first instance. Number 12, Frank.
And I suppose it's really that follow on, particularly in the bigger organisations. I mean, obviously, strata managers run from individuals up to, I suppose, massive corporates, for want of a better phrase, with a whole bunch of strata managers in them. If you've got a particular issue with your strata manager, asking for a new strata manager inside the same organisation sometimes might do the trick. If it's a pure personality conflict where it's not going to work or you've lost faith for some reason and there's justified reasons for it, then that happens. You know what I mean? Even internally, we're all built different ways. Even as lawyers, we relate to clients differently. Like I'm a emailer, not necessarily a chatter, whereas some of our people are chatters. We haven't quite got to the stage yet where we've almost got a matrix of what sort of lawyer do you want. Not that we've got that many, but it is a matter of making sure that you do try to meld people together that have similar communication needs. And the bigger strata manager companies probably have the ability to do that.
We're running out of time, Frank. I know we said 12, but we have one last one, and this is directed at the body corporate managers out there. Why not think about kicking the difficult ones to the curb? do you need that grief? That's probably a discussion for another time. Couple of quick questions there at the end. Chris, again, am I allowed to ask when the budget meeting will be held? Yep, you are.
Absolutely. I can tell you when that is, though. Normally, Dad said it's 6 to 7 weeks after the end of the body corporate's financial year. Everyone runs that, middle of the month after.
And even if you don't ask or not told or not invited, then it's part of the AGM, the budget anyway.
Yeah, and I should say the budget committee meeting's not something enshrined in statute.
Yeah,
it's just that's the process that most strata managers follow. End of financial year's in, they know what all the motions are. They've got the budgets for the coming year. They need to set the agenda. You have that actual meeting, so it's not a formal meeting in the sense of the Act requires it, but yeah. I'd say 99 out of 100 buildings have one of any size.
I think so. And Julia, is there any time frame in which the minutes of a committee meeting must be provided to members? Yes, there is. I think it's 21 days, isn't it, Frank?
I think so, yeah.
Yep. That's assuming that you have not opted out of receiving it. So if an owner can elect to opt out of receiving committee minutes if they so wish. We've come to the end, and some really good questions and feedback there today, everybody, which is heartening, I suppose, because, you know, I would assume that if you're tuning into this, then you are wanting to improve that relationship. So good work, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in, and don't forget to like and share, and as I say, register. That's where you'll get to know. Next week, Frank, how to end a management rights agreement.
Well, ending management rights agreements. We didn't say terminating, we said ending.
We did.
That'll be interesting.
That'll be a good one. And also stay tuned. We're approaching the end of April, which means that we'll shortly be telling you what our May topics are. A couple of good ones there as well. For now, though, thank you all, and we'll see you next time. Frank, thank you.
Done. See you, everyone. Bye.
See you. Bye.